The first knock came at 6:32 a.m. On Saturday, May 29th, three sharp raps that cracked the stillness of Maple Crest like a starter pistol at dawn. I was halfway through my first mug of French roast, the kind that steams in the Indiana morning and smells like burnt sugar and second chances, when Margaret Ellison's silhouette filled the frosted glass. 18 months in the state women's facility at Rockville had whittled her down to bone and spite, but the eyes were unchanged, winter steel, unblinking, the same stare that once made Harold Ashford repaint his garage at 2 a.m. because the trim was eggshell instead of ivory, and made Dorothy Jenkins sell her late husband's classic Mustang to pay a $1,200 fine for excessive lawn ornamentation, one ceramic gnome. I remember the exact moment I opened the door. The air smelled of cut grass and lilacs from Mrs. Henderson's hedge. My heart, which had been steady since my triple bypass in 22, gave one hard thud. Margaret stood there in a navy blazer pressed so sharp it could slice bread, hair pulled so tight it looked painful, a thick manila folder clutched like a hymnal. "Get off my property," she said before I even touched the knob. "I'm Richard Caldwell, 57, retired from 30 years of buying and flipping commercial real estate in Chicago. Cedar Ridge, Indiana, population 412, was supposed to be my quiet chapter. No more 4 a.m. conference calls, no more boardroom knives. I bought the corner lot at 1421 Maple Crest because the maple trees reminded me of my father's farm in Elkhart, where he taught me that land is the only thing that lasts. I never imagined I'd end up owning 15 more houses on the same cul-de-sac, or that the woman who once terrorized the block with a clipboard and a god complex would come back from prison believing the neighborhood still belonged to her. Margaret didn't wait for an invitation. She stepped forward, the scent of her lavender hand lotion sharp in the morning air. "Are you still here?" she asked, as if I were a squatter in my own home. "I thought you'd have the decency to leave." Her voice carried the same cadence that used to make my stomach knot during HOA meetings, slow, deliberate, every syllable a verdict. I felt the old fear crawl up my spine, the same fear that had kept me silent for 15 years while she fined, threatened, and foreclosed. I remembered the night in 2017 when she stood in my driveway with a flashlight, measuring the height of my Christmas lights, threatening a $500 fine if I didn't take them down by morning. I had complied. I hated myself for it. "Good morning, Margaret. Welcome home." She ignored the greeting. "This neighborhood needs leadership. Real leadership." The word real dripped like acid. In her world, leadership meant $300 fines for trash cans visible 10 minutes past pickup, foreclosure threats over rosebushes 1 inch too tall, and $12,000 siphoned from the emergency fund into her own checking account at First National. The judge had called it embezzlement. Margaret called it administrative flexibility. The jury took 43 minutes to convict. I started to close the door. Her palm slapped the wood, stopping it cold. The impact vibrated through my wrist. "I'm not finished." I met her stare. "Remove your hand." For 3 heartbeats, the only sound was the sprinkler across the street hissing like a snake, and the distant bark of the Martinez's golden retriever, Buddy, who had once been fined $150 for excessive vocalization. Then she stepped back, slow, deliberate, the folder tapping her thigh like a riding crop. "You'll hear from me, Richard. Soon." She didn't go home. She marched the sidewalks like a general inspecting troops, phone raised, notebook flapping. The Ashford's SUV in the driveway, click. The Hendersons' dented mailbox, click. The Martinez boys' skateboard ramp, click, click. Old Mr. Patterson came out in his robe to ask what she was doing. She photographed his slippers and told him they violated the Footwear Visibility Ordinance, a rule she had invented in 2018 and enforced with the zeal of a Puritan. By the time she disappeared around the corner, I had counted 23 houses and felt the first cold drip of dread down my spine. I stood in the doorway long after she was gone, coffee cooling in my hand, the sun climbing but doing nothing to warm the chill that had settled in my chest. I thought of Dorothy Jenkins, 76, widow, fixed income, who had cried in my kitchen the night Margaret foreclosed on her neighbor for a $400 fine. I thought of Harold Ashford, who had sold his daughter's college fund to pay a lien on a basketball hoop. I thought of the way Margaret used to stand at the podium during HOA meetings, voice rising like a preacher, convincing us all that her rules were the only thing standing between order and chaos. I thought of my own silence, year after year, and the shame burned hotter than the coffee. I called Daniel Harper, my attorney since the day Margaret's gavel fell. His voice was gravel and caffeine. "She's back," I said, already measuring grass with a tape. "Record everything," Daniel said. "Let her swing first. We need her to hang herself." I opened a new spreadsheet. Column A date, column B time, column C action, column D evidence, column E witnesses, column F emotional impact. Row 1, 6:32 a.m., front door confrontation, security cam 1, none yet, dread level 7/10. My hands shook as I typed. I added column G, memory triggered. Row 1, 2017 Christmas lights incident, shame level 8 out of 10. Tuesday, June 1st, brought the letters. Crisp white envelopes, no stamps, hand-delivered before dawn. Mine slid under the door while I was tying my shoes for a run. I opened it on the porch, the paper still cool from the night. 7 violations, each typed in 12-point courier, each citing bylaws that had been rewritten and ratified the week Margaret was sentenced. Paint color, unacceptable shade of taupe, code 47B. Grass height, 3.7 inches, maximum allowed 3.0. Porch light, 60 watts, maximum allowed 40. Garden edging, curved instead of straight. House numbers, brass instead of black. Mailbox, weathered. Vehicle storage, driveway instead of garage. Each carried a $500 daily fine. Total possible, $3,500 per day. Signature line, Margaret Ellison, acting HOA president. The letterhead was the old cedar tree logo, discontinued the week she was sentenced. I photographed the envelope, the letter, the fold lines, the shadow of my thumb on the paper, the faint scent of Margaret's lavender hand lotion still clinging to the flap. Then I walked the block with a thermos of coffee and a growing knot in my gut. 8 neighbors had identical envelopes. Harold Ashford met me at his garage, face gray, eyes red from sleeplessness. She says my SUV is a commercial vehicle because it has a roof rack. Dorothy Jenkins, 76, widow, fixed income, opened her door in slippers and showed me hers with hands that shook like autumn leaves. Richard, I can't pay $3,000 a day. They'll take my house. Her voice cracked on the last word, and I felt the old guilt surge. I had stayed silent for too long. They won't, I said, and meant it. Because these rules don't exist anymore. I spent the afternoon in my dining room, blinds drawn, laptop glowing. The new bylaws, ratified unanimously 6 months after Margaret's conviction, sat open in one window. Her citation sat in another. Paint color, unrestricted. Grass height, 4 inches maximum, mine measured 3. Vehicle storage, driveway permitted indefinitely. Every charge was a ghost of regulations we'd buried on purpose. I created a second spreadsheet. Column A, violation cited. Column B, current bylaw. Column C, discrepancy. Column D, legal consequence. By 6 p.m., I had 9 scanned letters, 9 terrified neighbors, and 1 email drafted with Laura Mitchell, the new HOA president. Subject line, urgent, unauthorized communications. We attached the current bylaws, Laura's contact info, and a single sentence in bold. Margaret Ellison holds no authority. Report any further letters immediately. The replies rolled in like thunder. Relief. Fury. Fear. Harold attached a photo of Margaret photographing his backyard at 11:47 p.m. From the sidewalk. Legal, but the flash lit his daughter's bedroom window like a lightning strike. Dorothy sent a voice memo, her voice trembling. She stood outside my window for 20 minutes. I could see her shadow on the curtains. I haven't slept since. The Martinez family sent a video. Margaret at 1:03 a.m. Flashlight beams sweeping their son's skateboard ramp, muttering, eyesore, loud enough for the Ring camera to catch. The Davis family sent a photo of their mailbox smashed at 3:17 a.m., the metal twisted like a pretzel. Margaret answered at 2:14 a.m. Thursday, June 3rd. My phone vibrated against the nightstand, front yard motion. I rolled out of bed, heart already sprinting, and opened the app. Night vision painted her in ghost green, dark hoodie, dark pants, canvas bag over her shoulder. She crouched by my front lawn, extended a measuring tape vertically, and angled her phone so 3-inch grass looked 6. She tried the garage handle, locked, rattled it twice, then peered through the window with a flashlight, her breath fogging the glass. She muttered, still violating, loud enough for the mic to catch. Satisfied, she taped a red final notice to my door, the paper flapping like a surrender flag in the wind. She photographed it from 3 angles, then melted into the shadows. I recorded the feed on my old phone, voice low. 2:17 a.m., Margaret Ellison trespassing, manufacturing evidence, attempting unauthorized entry. Garage handle rattled twice. Flashlight visible, through window. Audible statement, still violating. I saved it to 3 clouds before my pulse slowed. Then I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the empty street on the monitor, and realized I hadn't breathed in 90 seconds. My hands shook so badly I had to set the phone down. I thought of my father, who died the year Margaret started her reign, and how he would have hated seeing me afraid in my own home. I thought of my wife, Ellen, who passed in 2019, and how she had begged me to fight back years earlier. I had promised her I would, but I never did. Until now. I called Daniel at 2:37 a.m. He answered on the first ring. Send it now. I did. He called back at 3:12. This is gold. Nighttime trespass with intent to interfere. Attempted unauthorized entry. Evidence tampering. But we want the pattern. 1 count gets her probation. 10 counts get her years. He paused. You okay, Richard? I'm wide awake. Good. Stay that way. Chief Sandra Brooks arrived at 7 a.m. with black coffee and a warrant pad. We watched the footage in her cruiser, the windows fogging from our breath. Clear as Sunday service, she said. But we want the pattern. 1 count gets her probation. 10 counts get her years. She handed me a panic button the size of a matchbox. Press this. We're here in 90 seconds. Plainclothes units will start drive-thrus at dusk. I turned my dining room into a command center. HOA statutes stacked like bricks. Case law printed and highlighted. A 42-page timeline grew across 3 monitors. Every letter, every photo, every midnight footstep. I found Wilson v. Ridgewood Estates, 2019, where an appellate court eviscerated a former president for identical fraud. The judge's words burned into my brain. HOA boards serve at the pleasure of residents, not as feudal lords. I read the opinion aloud to Dorothy Jenkins over tea on June 5th. She cried into her chamomile, then asked if she could keep the printout for courage. I made her a laminated copy. The HOA meeting on Friday, June 11th. Packed the community center until folding chairs scraped linoleum. 70 residents, 50 seats, standing room only. Margaret sat in back, arms crossed, eyes tracking like a sniper. Laura opened the floor. Margaret strode forward without the mic, slapped her folder on the table with a crack that silenced the room. I built this place. You let it rot. I have proof. She opened the folder. Photographs spilled like playing cards. Harold's SUV, Dorothy's slippers, the Martinez ramp, my grass at a deceptive angle, Mr. Patterson's gnome wearing a tiny Santa hat in June. I stood. So do I. My laptop projected 6 camera angles in split screen. Midnight, grass measuring. Forged letters sliding into mailboxes at 4:12 a.m. Margaret keying my car at 3:12 a.m. Shadow at the edge of frame, but the scratch matched the angle of her arm. Gasps turned to murmurs, turned to shouts. Margaret lunged toward the projector. Lies. Edited. Security. 2 retired Marines who volunteer for bingo night. Escorted her out while she screamed about burning deeds and stolen neighborhoods. 40 witnesses, 6 cameras, 1 confession on record. I have keys to every house you bought. I'll burn them all. You'll wake up to smoke and sirens. The room erupted. Laura banged her gavel until it cracked. Order. Order. Harold Ashford stood, voice shaking. She fined me $1,800 for a basketball hoop 6 inches over the line. I paid because I thought she could take my house. Dorothy Jenkins stood next, tears streaming. She made me sell my husband's car. He died in that car. It was all I had left. One by one, residents stood, voices rising like a tide. Margaret's screams echoed from the parking lot. You'll regret this. Every one of you. 2 days later, Sunday, June 13th, my phone pinged at 11:47 p.m., tomorrow 9 a.m. You lose everything. I forwarded it to Daniel, to Sandra, to the neighborhood watch chat. At 8:55 a.m. heavy flatbed tow truck hissed to a stop, air brakes sighing like a dying animal. Margaret stepped down in navy blazer and heels, waving a lean authorization like a battle flag. The driver, barely 25, looked 12 years old and terrified. I stepped onto the porch in slippers and a robe. Morning, Margaret. She smiled without warmth. Your vehicle violates multiple codes. Unpaid fines total $12,000. We're repossessing. She handed the driver a clipboard. He glanced at it, then at me, then at the growing crowd of neighbors in bathrobes and pajamas. I dialed Laura on speaker. Any tow order? None. The board has issued 0 liens. The driver's face went the color of skim milk. Ma'am, you said this was legitimate HOA business. You paid me $500 cash. Sirens answered before Margaret finished her speech. Chief Brooks stepped from an unmarked sedan, badge flashing in the morning sun. Margaret Ellison, you're under arrest. She read rights while neighbors poured from houses like church letting out. Margaret jerked against the cuffs, spat threats about gasoline and matches. I'll burn every deed you stole. I have copies of every key. The officer radioed. Suspect confessing arson, admitting unauthorized keys, at attempted burglary, terroristic threats, conspiracy. The tow driver handed over forged documents without being asked. The lien was signed Laura Mitchell, HOA president, in Margaret's handwriting. The notary stamp was from a UPS store that closed in 2022. The driver, voice shaking, added, she gave me a list of 15 houses to tow from. Said they all owed back fines. Bail denied. 19 felonies. Trial set for October. The DA added a 20th count when lab analysis found Margaret's fingerprints on the keying tool left in my flower bed, and a 21st when the PI she hired turned state's evidence for a reduced sentence. Cedar Ridge exhaled. We held a barbecue in the park I deeded back to the HOA on June 20th. Kids chased frisbees through sprinklers. Dorothy Jenkins grilled peach cobbler until the air smelled like heaven. Laura raised a lemonade toast. I sold 5 houses below market to young families, turned 3 into senior rentals, and watched Mrs. Jenkins move in with a hug that smelled like lavender and relief. Harold Ashford named his new golden retriever Justice. The Martinez boy painted his skateboard ramp with a mural of a phoenix rising from fines. The civil suit settled in weeks. Margaret's assets, frozen since arrest, covered restitution, punitive damages, and legal fees. She took a plea, 5 years, no parole for 3. The judge cited pattern of predatory behavior spanning decades and ordered her to pay $87,000 in restitution to the 8 families she terrorized with fake fines, plus $50,000 to the HOA for the embezzled emergency fund. 6 weeks later, July 31st, a letter arrived postmarked from the Women's Correctional Facility. Margaret's handwriting, shakier now, the ink smudged as if written in haste. You think it's over. My daughter Emily remembers every slight. She's patient. She's watching. She's learning. She knows where you sleep. A photograph fluttered out. Emily at the Cedar Ridge entrance at dusk. Same cheekbones, same stare, but younger, hungrier, a smartphone in one hand and a key ring in the other. The keys glinted in the streetlight, 15 of them, each tagged with a house number. I photographed the letter, filed it, emailed the watch. Chief Brooks already had Emily's file. 32, no felony record, but 3 restraining orders in 2 counties, 2 dismissed lawsuits for harassment, 1 settled out of court for $15,000. We'll watch, Sanders said. You taught us how. I keep the panic button on my key ring. 12 cameras roll 24/7. The timeline lives in the cloud, updated daily. Cedar Ridge sleeps easy, but we remember, power abused invites vigilance. Margaret taught us the cost of fear. We paid it in sleepless nights and legal briefs. We chose the price of preparedness. And if Emily ever steps onto Maple Crest with her mother's keys and her mother's rage, she'll find 70 families who learned from the best how to document, how to stand together, and how to make sure the second act never gets written. If you've ever faced a bully who thought rules didn't apply, or watched justice crawl while danger sprinted, tell me in the comments. Where do you draw the line between self-defense and obsession? When does documentation become armor? And when does it become a cage? When is enough truly enough? Speak your mind. The algorithm listens when we talk.